Iran is burning. Overnight, the United States and Israel struck Iranian oil infrastructure, igniting massive fires throughout Tehran. It was so bad that there are reports today of black rain as soot and oil fall back to earth. And meanwhile, desalination plants are now being targeted and possibly destroyed throughout the Middle East, which sounds boring, but that's where millions get their drinking water from. And if you think bombs can kill a lot of people, wait until there's a shortage of fresh water. Now, overnight, U.S. and Israeli forces expanded their strike campaign to target Iranian oil infrastructure for the first time. And the footage coming out from last night is apocalyptic. And we know that the U.S. and Israel have gone after Iranian oil infrastructure in the past, certainly during the 12-day war. And I believe there have been a couple one-off strikes over the course of the last week. But last night, it was very clearly a focus. In fact, Iranian state media reported hits on at least 5 different locations, 4 oil storage depots, and a petroleum products transfer center. The United States, from what I've seen, has not commented on these strikes yet. The IDF verified this took place, saying the Iranian military forces make direct and frequent use of these fuel tanks to operate military infrastructure. Through them, the Iranian regime distributes fuel to various consumers, including military entities in Iran. So, of course, from a purely military perspective, that is one way you can go after opposing forces, is shut off their access to fuel. It limits what they're able to do on the battlefield. So there is a military perspective to this. There are some additional short-term impacts, as you can imagine, outside of the military as well. So we've already seen widespread fuel shortages and blackouts throughout Iran for some time now. Of course, this is likely to increase those for the very near term, if not spread out over a longer period of time. There's a possibility this adds to civilian unrest, pushing back against the government. Possibility, right? We don't know exactly how this is going to be interpreted, but there are already high tensions in Iran. I mean, they've been going back years and years, and of course, we know they peaked during the protests a few months ago. It's possible that during this leadership vacuum, the added fuel shortages could lead to additional protests. Possible. Now, we also know this is probably going to drive sustained volatility in the oil market, which is one that could directly affect how the United States continues or ends this war. I do believe that President Trump is probably very sensitive to oil prices. We've already seen prices at the gas pump go up in recent days. My understanding is oil prices have surged around 30% already. That's likely to increase as the markets open on Monday. And it's not just the Iranian oil facilities that last night took an absolute beating. I mean, hammered in Iran. Kuwait also got hit. Just last night, multiple sources confirmed that Iranian drones directly targeted fuel tanks at the Kuwaiti International Airport, causing a huge fire at one of the depots. They do say the fire was later brought under control. The Kuwaiti defense minister described them as a direct targeting of vital infrastructure, and the Public Authority for Civil Aviation echoed the drone attacks on fuel facilities. Another possible fallout here, of course, is the idea that if the U.S. and Israel start targeting oil facilities, then Iran could start targeting oil facilities. I wouldn't worry so much about that. They already were. We saw a strike on the Saudi Aramco facility a couple days ago. Looks like that's already in the cards for Iran, but this, of course, could escalate that in both regards. If we see these strikes starting to have an impact in either direction, it's not unlikely that either side kind of doubles down on that strategy. Now, to that end, the Associated Press, talking about the kind of escalation in Iranian strikes recently, quoted the president yesterday saying, quote, "When we are attacked, we have no choice but to respond. The more pressure they impose on us, the stronger our response will be. Iran, our country, will not bow easily in the face of bullying, oppression, or aggression, and it never has." This is something to keep in mind as we see an expansion of the Iranian strike campaign. So we talked in recent videos how the U.S. and Israeli versus Iranian war aims are not necessarily the same. You can go down the list of what the United States and Israel are hoping to achieve, from regime change to the destruction of the Iranian missile program and the elimination of their nuclear program. From the Iranian perspective, it is about survival. And that doesn't necessarily mean the destruction of the U.S. or Israeli military. It means getting the U.S. and Israel to stop this war. One way that they're going about that is increasing their attacks on civilian infrastructure across the region. In fact, just yesterday, we started to get news that some desalination facilities were starting to get hit. Now, these are massive industrial plants that convert seawater into drinkable fresh water. You can imagine that's a little bit important in the Middle East, my understanding is there's around 400 desalination plants spread throughout the Gulf. And at times, these can bring, the estimate is as many as 100 million people rely on these facilities for their drinking water. So should these start to go out, even short-term impacted, we're talking about immediate water shortages in a number of areas throughout the Gulf. Quite a few cities have days stored, but you're talking about weeks at best. And it starts to get backlogged, and some of these strategic reserves could be vulnerable. And again, when you're talking about drinking water running out, people start to leave the area immediately. Now, yesterday, the Iranian foreign minister accused the United States of striking a desalination facility in Iran. Quote, "The U.S. committed a blatant and desperate crime by attacking a freshwater desalination plant on Keshem Island." He says water supply in 30 villages has been impacted. Attacking Iran's infrastructure is a dangerous move with grave consequences. The U.S. set this precedent, not Iran. I've not seen any verification that took place or that was the United States, but we do seem to have confirmation that at least some of these strikes are taking place back and forth over the last 24 hours. And one note on that, depending on the country, it's more or less important. It's a big deal no matter where these strikes take place. But in Iran, as their foreign minister mentions there, that specific facility would impact 30 villages. There are other countries throughout the Gulf where like 40 to 90% of the population relies on these facilities for their drinking water. Bahrain is one of those with a heavy reliance on these facilities. And it does look like in the last few hours, Iran carried out an attack against one of the desalination facilities in Bahrain. There was also a report earlier that the UAE actually entered the fight, carrying out their strike on the Iranian desalination facilities. The UAE has since denied that, said they have not carried out that strike. They have not entered the war in an offensive capacity. Now, in terms of what this means immediately, you're talking about a humanitarian crisis. Again, roughly 100 million people rely on desalinated water regionally. That stops or even slows down to a significant degree. You're talking about dehydration, of course, disease outbreaks, mass displacement that could quickly follow. In fact, historically, the United States has believed that if Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, if those desalination plants started to fail, they would need to evacuate within a week. Evacuate Riyadh. And similar risks are at play for other capitals like Kuwait City or Dubai. Of course, if there's a limit of fresh drinking water available, you can imagine the impact that has on military operations. You can imagine the impact that has on the economy. I mean, people aren't going to work if they can't live, right? And it does not take long for people to start to die of dehydration. So any impact on the freshwater drinking supply is major, possibly catastrophic. And this lines up with what we've talked in recent days about Iran trying to do anything and everything to survive. They are a cornered animal. The regime is a cornered animal right now. They have already done things that we thought were off the table. The last-ditch effort in a lot of war games the U.S. has run through in recent years was the shutting down of the Strait of Hormuz, saying they would only do that as a last-ditch desperation effort. They did that right away. And the strait, for all intents and purposes, is shut down right now. The longer that goes on, the more damaging that is, not just for Iran, but for the United States, for our Gulf partners, for the world economy. So Iran went for the jugular right away, and it should not be shocking, as tragic as it is, that the desalination plants are now being targeted as well. Now, there's a couple other topics that I'm not going to get to in today's video, but I did want to address because they're getting more and more attention. First is the school strike. The United States is alleged to have carried out a strike in the opening hours or days of the conflict in southern Iran that may have led to the deaths of 170 or more students, young girls between the ages of like 7 and 12. We've got a handful of open source public reporting coming out saying that the United States is likely behind that. We have talked about that in recent videos. I've been waiting to address that because the U.S. is saying that we are doing an investigation and going to put out more information. I might have to move that video up because yesterday President Trump denied those reports and said actually it was the IRGC that carried out that strike. That seems to be in direct contrast to some pretty reliable looking reporting from a number of outlets at this point. So not ignoring that, was kind of waiting for the right amount of analysis to come in before addressing it. Didn't want to present just the side saying the U.S. did it, if the U.S. statement was kind of outstanding. But at this point, I think we need to go ahead and dive into that. The second one is last night there appears to have been a bombing at the Oslo embassy. So according to CNN, they say the U.S. embassy in Oslo was hit by an explosion early Sunday, according to Norwegian police, who said the blast caused minor damage but no injuries. They say it's not known whether the blast in Oslo is linked in any way to events in the Middle East. So again, just have this on your radar. One of the possibilities of the Iranian regime lashing out is the possibility of carrying out terror attacks abroad. So there's no indication at this point that this is linked or a part of that. Fortunately, nobody was killed or wounded, but it's just something to have on the radar that this is one of the possible routes Iran can go as they become more and more desperate. I'm a little bit surprised we haven't seen more in this regard, but technically Iran still hasn't even tapped into all of their proxies. I mean, the Houthis haven't retaliated really at all quite yet. So there's still a few cards left for the Iranian regime to play. Terror attacks abroad is likely one of those, so that's something we'll keep an eye on. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.